Hi, everyone, and welcome to the MOG Effect, Inside the Chaos and How to Gain Clarity When Managing Government Digital Transformation, the podcast where we unpack how government restructures impact digital teams, platforms, and the public. Hi, I'm Akhil, and I've been working with Salsa for the last 6 years and also was in government with Federal Department of Communications, the Arts for 8 years before that in the web publishing team.
Hi, I'm Julia Topliss, the digital practice lead at Salsa Digital. We are your friendly co hosts, and in this episode, we are following on from last week's topic on content ownership and governance. And so today we are going to focus on content accountability. So, Akhil, let's kick things off. We've obviously just been through an election. We can see that a MOG has happened. Do you want to just give us a brief rundown of what you're seeing?
Yeah, so we've just gone through a bit of a MOG change through the election at the moment. There's been kind of two departments that have really had the most of the changes kind of focused towards them. It was the Department of Aged Care, which was Health and Aged Care, which is now Health, Disability and Aging. So they've kind of changed their name and kind of a bit of their structure, as well as kind of having a few extra directives. The other department was the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and Arts is now added sport to it. So there's a sport in the name. So it's transport, regional development, communication, sport, and arts. So they're kind of the two main MOGs. Most or many of the other departments have had kind of internal realignments of their directive and functions, but they don't really count as a MOG per se. There's no structural changes necessarily in there, but they do have kind of updates to content, which will kind of stream across the different areas of the websites depending on how that kind of plays out. So there's some different functions there. They'll have to update their content as well accordingly once they can determine exactly what that impacts.
So, what I think we're seeing, right, is that we've got these mega departments, right, that are just doing so much, just a
Yes.
huge amount, and then there's smaller departments. And I guess our topic today is around accountability. So I guess the first question
Yeah.
I've got for you is, how do you ensure clear accountability, especially during like this transition phase?
Yeah.
I'm really interested to kind of unpick. Like, I really want to ask the question, who makes up these names? But I'm not going to do that. We'll focus on the kind of
Yeah.
the topic around accountability and content governance.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And it's actually interesting you mentioned the large agencies, the mega agencies, and the smaller ones. I think it comes down really to the publishing model that the agency uses. So whether it's centralized or decentralized, that makes a big difference because if it's a decentralized model, that means that the subject matter experts, the areas or the line areas, business areas, however you want to call them, they're the ones that manage their own content. And if they move in a structural change in a MOG, then that content should be going out with them as well. Conversely, if content is coming in or a structural area is coming in, then that would be added to the website. So that's going to be easy to manage because those areas will know their content. They're pretty familiar with what goes on. And that distributed publishing, I think, is more reflective of larger agencies where it is very difficult to manage, the mega multi-portfolio content that sits on some of these sites and multiple sites. So that's where the decentralized model kind of works. But in the centralized model, where they're most likely smaller agencies, that's where you really do want clear accountability of who owns the content. Because if it is a centralized model, that central publishing team will need to be able to make changes to the content and know who to ask when there are changes or questions or clarity or typos or information that needs to be updated, etc. Maybe not typos, but fact checking things, especially they do need to go out to those kind of areas. So that the accountability is really comes down to how they structure the sometimes the website itself. Does that have some kind of tag in the back end? Is there traceability of who owns or where they can actually tag that information as content owners?
So I want to zoom out, right? Because I think that we need to like put our like digital developer hats on,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
It's because often as developers we're told or we're asked, should we go distributed? Should we go centralized? So in your opinion, do you have like is it a like it doesn't sound like it's a one size fits all, right? Like
No,
there's obviously the business need, but I think in terms of like a developer process and how we could best serve our clients, do you have an opinion?
yeah, I do have ideas and thoughts and even insights into how it's been done, right? So, um, sometimes, yes, agencies go, hey, we want workflows and we want it to be, easy as possible. But there is a massive business consideration, right? The size of the publishing team makes a huge difference. If you have a two-person team or a 10-person team, the ability to manage content. So if you have a two-person team for a small department, I think at one stage, Department of Communications was one of the smallest departments, only had 500 people. That's on the verge of being an agency converting to a department versus someone who has 5,000 or defense, right? It's huge. You can't have a two-person team managing, thousands of pages with that much. So, the decision is really around the business and how the business wants to manage the web publishing to a degree. And then, managing even when we had central publishing with the Department of Communications of 500 people or so, keeping track of the areas and some of the changes that even happen that are not MOG. There are often changes that happen within the department itself. Changes between the business org itself might change around a little bit. So areas might kind of merge or split off depending on how things go. Keeping track of those changes is quite important. But a lot of the content and the website itself is reflective of the structural nature of the department itself. So that the contents there and the IA really reflects the different areas and departments that are, or business areas and org units that a business has. So that does help a bit, but yeah, it can be tricky. But it is a lot of it's to do with how the business wants to run or even has the capacity. So actually, on one more thing on that, the other way to get around that sometimes though is engaging vendors or digital specialists such as publishers, content support to publishers to augment your team. So in some cases, there smaller teams have been outsourcing that work, the publishing work, to external vendors to help. And just do that as a structural change. So there is an ability to kind of blend. Just again, it depends on the business needs.
Okay. So, um, so if we look at Department of Health, Disability and Aging, that's a new name, right?
Sure.
Um, so disability, I'm thinking NDIS. So that'll have come from social services into the health portfolio. And what you're saying is that that digital team will pick up, sorry, that content team will pick up their laptops, physically move, and then the content's going to come through into in the same structure now, or is there like an IA process that's going to happen? Do you think as part of that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, they may not physically move, right? Sometimes the area could be self-contained, so they just stay where they are. But the content, yes, is structurally moved into the department.
Mm.
So there's a chance that the NDIS content, where it lives in social services right now, Service Australia, it it will move from that site to a different site. That's a kind of migration of content that comes across. So and then the ownership would then be on the Department of Health to look after and manage that content depending on how they have their publishing model.
So then, does like so when we talk about sort of accountability and content governance, does that mean that then the approval? So often that content would have, like a draft, um, review, approve, publish sort of life cycle in it.
Workflow, yeah, yeah,
Workflow,
yeah,
yep, that's
yeah.
the word. Thank you. Um, those people might change, right? Higher up the chain.
Yes, the people who look after the content could move around as well. They may not want to
Yeah.
go to a different department, but often they'll be just it's it's kind of like when a business is bought out by a larger business,
Mm,
right? If we were bought out by Google, the only thing that really changes maybe is the name on the front, right? We still do the thing we do every day. Like it doesn't really matter. So it's often like that, right? Sometimes you'll
okay.
move, but generally everything stays the same. You just do the thing you're doing. Sometimes you might
So
actually move buildings, but
sometimes, okay, so sometimes it's
yeah.
like a little hiccup, and sometimes it's really traumatic, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Wow,
So yeah, I get yeah, so it just varies. So
mm.
yeah, so that accountability is there. So sometimes the owners will change, sometimes they may not. So um yeah, then yeah, it's really up to the web publishing team to keep a track of, what things are changing if they need to change. But again, coming back to the technical side of things on the system side, on the CMS or the website itself, having that last change date on there, the page updated or the last change date on there, and on the back end having the content owner or area at least or a tag, that's really useful. So managing that, and then even if a page has come across from another department. If it's not been looked at for over a year because their content lifecycle or review cycle is different, then it's an opportunity to kind of go through, do a quick audit, go, hey, look, these pages are quite old. Has anyone looked at it? Who's the new owner now? Or where does it look at? Have you guys done what you need to do? So having those little things in place kind of do help.
Okay. And what about documents that might help support that governance process?
Yeah, I mean, intranets are quite good for that. So having that kind of publishing model and publishing guidelines, especially documented
Mm.
out, that really does help. And that also helps with the people who might come in. So if you have a new area or a new business area that comes in, for them to learn what the new guidelines are and how that publishing model and how the internal publishing works is really important because they may have content that needs to be changed really quickly. So to make it smoother, it could be different. There are nuances. Then if they know what to do and how to do that, how to get it approved, all those types of things would be really useful, especially if there's timelines involved.
Okay. And when we were talking before, like, one of the differences between kind of other websites, non-government websites, is that you have clear owners attached to specific content, but in this case, it's more the whole business unit's responsible, right? So you're going to have less chance of sort of ghost owners of times past because the role stays fixed, right?
Yeah, the kind of the orphan content or the
Mm,
specific areas. I mean, even though an area owns it, within that area there has to be, a lead for an actual content approver. And they're normally the person
mm,
that owns it. It may not have to be a senior person. It can be devolved down to mid-tier or wherever the area feels comfortable with, depending on the type of content that it is. But in terms of orphan content, you can still get orphan content.
mm,
Sometimes there are pages and sections that happen. There are, changes that people just didn't realize are big enough, and they had content on the site, or something that was quite old that had to be there, like legislative stuff that has to be there for 2 or 3 years. 2 years later, something changes, and people forget that, 2 years again later that something changed. So you can often have orphan content, but then it's the web publishing team that's keeping an eye on all the content that's there, and again having that content lifecycle, having a review period for all content does kind of help get through that process of making sure that all content's reviewed and there is no orphan content.
okay, so I'm just also sort of thinking that you're going through this whole process, you're auditing the content at the same time quite often, right? Like, because you're reviewing it, checking.
Yeah.
I can imagine that, like, if there's a name change, you've got to go through all of that content and make sure that the name is changed to the content. Um, is that happening programmatically, or is that something that some poor person is sitting there just doing find replace on hundreds of pages?
I mean, that's a really good question. Coming back to, I think we touched on it
Mm,
last week, it's not just the content and the kind of those changes, but also brand voice and
mm,
alignment with writing style. So if content's coming in or from going out to another department, getting that realignment of the content
mm,
itself is important. Is it happening manually? I believe it would be happening manually. Is there an opportunity nowadays to use this, AI or something
mm,
else? I'm sure there is an
mm.
opportunity. Is government using it? I know it's a question that they're trying to figure out how to use AI in general, but this could be a kind of an easy way, potentially, to kind of put public information, public content anyway, into AI and go, look, this is our writing style guide. Please update or highlight those changes. At least a human then can go and kind of edit as they need to.
And that would also be like metadata, right? So the
Yeah,
metadata on the site
exactly.
too would have to. So that's probably, is that like the final step, or is that what you do that as you're going through each bit of content?
So that would probably, it's a good area to touch on, right? It's content
Mm,
migration. So how that content comes across, right? If there's
mm.
only a few pages, maybe it's manually done, create a new page in the new system. That metadata and things should be picked up as that new piece of content gets created. If it's being migrated, in bulk, then yes, that part of that migration will be to ensure that it gets kind of cleansed and adapted to the new standards as it comes through.
So, Akhil, you're not going to know it, but we have already gone through our time again,
All
amazingly.
the way. Yeah. Quick.
So
Yeah.
brilliant, thank you. And I think that was a great breakdown of governance and accountability. So next week we're diving into content under pressure. So we're sorting, auditing, and restructuring during a MOG, and I think we'll see some repeatable themes. Right, there seems to be some things that are coming up again and again. So, thank you for tuning into Salsa Digital's The MOG Effect, Inside the Chaos on How to Gain Clarity when Managing Government Digital Transformation. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or leave a review on our YouTube channel. This helps us keep making content that helps digital teams stay one step ahead. You can also find links, resources, and episode notes on our website at Salsa Digital. Thanks, Akhil.
Thank you.
See you
See you
next
next
week.
week.
Bye.